So we have seen constructors, we have seen the three types, and we have seen the differences between them. Now let's talk about setters and getters, which are methods that are used to access instance variables. Because usually instance variables are declared private or protected, and we want to access them from the driver class. So a setter is a method that is used to set or change the value or possibly values of some instance variables. The getter, however, is just to retrieve that value or set of values. So let's go and create some setters and getters. But before this, we said that instance variables are usually created as private or protected. So let me make those private and let me see, will I really need setters and getters, or I can just ignore them? So if I create those as private, now I will not be able to access them from here. So if I just save this, let me just go and say save. An error popped in here. I have an error right away. I cannot access those, let alone changing them. And this is more secure approach, because if I don't have them as private, I can just come here and say something like s1.major is equal to some other major and change it. And I don't want this to happen. Maybe I don't want to allow that. So how to do this? Let me just delete those two students, and let's see how can we fix this. Now let's start with getters, because I'm trying to get the values in here. So let me start with getters. So I will come here and I will just say, okay, I will create a getter for the first name. Okay. And the getter is going to be a method that is returning the instance variable. And first name is of type string, so I will have a method that is going to return a string. So I will say this is going to be public, and since it's going to return a string, so it's going to be public string. And we usually call setters and getters with names that make sense. So this is going to be public string get first name, and I will not provide it with any arguments, but what I need to do is return the first name of this object. And I can do the same thing for last name for major. So let me just do a getter for last name. So let me copy this and do a getter for last name, and this is going to be get last name, and it's going to return the last name to me. And let's just have a getter for, let's say, major. So getter for the major, and I will say, okay, get major in this case. Let me just make it uppercase. And finally, while we're at it, let's just create a getter for the student ID. So get student ID. Now this is going to allow me to access all of those variables. So this is going to return major in here, and this is going to return this dot student ID. Although I still have the error here because I'm trying to access the values directly, but I can say, okay, to access the first name, I have a public method that's called get first name. To access the student ID, I have a public method that's called get student ID. To access the major, I have a public method that's called get major. So get major. And I have an issue here, which when I saved it, it's gone. So that's not a problem. Sometimes you need to save it to get rid of the errors. And when I save this, I run it, and everything is working just fine. Now, what about the setters? The setters will allow me to change the values that I want to allow people to change. So if I don't want the student ID to be changed, I will not create a setter for this. So in this case, let me just create a setter for major, and then it is the exact same thing to create any setter for any instance variable. So this is a setter for major, and then what I have here is going to be a void method, because I'm not returning anything, I'm just changing something, but I'll need some kind of argument to set that major to. So I'll say, okay, it is going to be called public void. I'm going to call it set major. You can call it change major. It's not going to change anything. This is just a name. And it's going to take a string here that's called major. This needs to be inside. And what I will do is I'll say this dot major is equal to whatever major I'm providing in here. And this is a setter for the major. Now, to create a setter for every other instance variable, it is going to be the exact same procedure. Now, let me go here, and after I print this information, let me just say, okay, changing the major to information systems, and I will print all of the information again. Now I will just, if I print it without changing the major, it's gonna print the same thing. So I will just go and say, okay, S3 dot, and if you see now, I have something that's called set major, and I will provide a major called information systems and save it. And why do I have an error here? String, oh, I did not save it, this class, so let me just save this. Now I'm fine. So let me just run it. Now major is information systems. Now, is it a good practice to print everything like this every time if I want to print everything? There is a better way to do it, which is going to be some form of a getter. So, but it's not gonna return. It's not a getter in the terms that it's a getter, but it's what we call an info, or some people refer to it as a toString. So what I will do is I'll say, okay, to print everything, I will create a void method that's called getInfo, and inside this, what I will do is I will print everything. So system.out.println, and I will say something like student name, and this is going to be plus last name, and then I'll need just a comma here, so I'll have a comma space and then first name, and then I will print out the major, so sysout, and then I will say student ID first, student ID, and this is going to be plus student ID, and finally let me print out the major. So system out print line student major is going to be added in here, and let me save this. So instead of printing all of that here, I can just do this s3.getInfo. I change the spelling. s3.get. For some reason it's info. Let me just make it info and make it info right here. Same thing in this. I can just go s3.getInfo. This is gonna save me some time. It's going to print whatever I just gave it. So this is the name, this is the major, and then changing the major to information systems. This is name, ID, and major. And this is how you create setters and getters and a get info or a toString method for your class.